You wake up in a beautiful temple, water pouring out from various openings alongside and within it, as the sound of a bell echoes from far away, just out of reach, but ever so close. The body you once thought you had as a human now gone, replaced with that of a totem of sorts. Did it work? Is she alright? The question echoes through your mind as you find a wooden shack at the top of the temple and enter it, as a blinding light finds your vision before you see yourself somewhere entirely different. This is the gist of a 2016 free-to-play indie platformer called Mandagon, developed by Blind Sky Studios, specifically by Tom Kitchen. And let me tell you, this game was something that just entirely destroyed the nostalgia aspect for myself when I booted it up. I mean, I hadn't played that game since the middle of high school, and that was, oh my god, 2019. This game, under the same lens as Monument Valley, which I would love to make a video about soon, as well as those like Opus, The Day We Found Earth, holds a special form of comfort from the more cultural musical aspects of wind chimes, minor keys, and the thing is, that music is used to select places from wherever you want to locate a tablet or check the map. It just adds this sense of concentration, which, understanding the context of the game itself, makes a lot of sense. In a Tricycle article by Lakshmi Gandhi, Kitchen discusses the inspiration behind many aspects of the game, the main source of the external construction being Tibetan Buddhism concepts. Specifically Bardo, the space similar to a more universally understood limbo, a point between life and death, the latter of which makes up the internal conflicts and specifics of the game, something that Kitchen has experience with in his life, making the game under his point of grieving. He mentioned that the name Mandagon is essentially meaningless, or an empty vessel, which, in looking at the narrative storytelling of the game itself, seems to make some form of sense, as paying attention to details he points out, like the inability to take fall damage and the constant setbacks, which, yes, like you can see in the background, I encountered many, many times. But that's the beauty of all of it, isn't it? In the book Lost Person Behavior, psychologist Dr. Kenneth Hill discusses the psychological perspective of what it means to be lost, describing how, as we move around in the environment, particularly places that we are not so familiar with, we are rarely able to maintain this degree of orientation. We may find ourselves in new settings and be forced to rely on wayfinding cues such as road signs or trail markings to find our way back to known locations. Much of the time, being spatially oriented means merely that we know the right route to travel in order to get home, such as the correct sequence of turns on city streets. In this case, knowing where you are actually means knowing the way, rather than being able to pinpoint your location on the map. It rarely occurs to us in such circumstances that we lack real spatial orientation, such as knowing the direction of home or the layout of a land. Rather, we may have the illusion of being oriented, such as incorrectly assuming that home is that direction, merely because the road seems to take us that way. The road may have a gradual bend that eventually pointed to some entirely different direction. And so, understandably, the player is supposed to feel this sense of confusion. That while this isn't some open world adventure of sorts, it's still entirely composed of the situation relating to some format of home, one way or another. Whether through the shacks that typically will hold one of the 6 tablets needed to unlock the ending of the game, or the crackling of campfires and chimneys and fireplaces within some of them as well. Mandagon is an experience, not just one of the living. The story of Mandagon is one that I've seen theories about in its Steam review section and several comments, ones that, at the end of the day, with the theme of sacrifice within the entirety of the subtext within your playthrough, the idea behind is simple. Many times when you're exploring around the area, you'll encounter these small snippets of wisdom from skeletal floating pieces, each one dictating either some line of encouraging advice or some prospect of the story in its entirety. There are a total of 9 encounters with them from my playthrough, and from piecing them together, I believe that the order is this. A child so fragile, with bones of clay, a father's soul proposed a trade. Sputter cough and blooded breath, sickness scuttles inside her chest. Rib for rib, lung for lung, and even trade, old for young. The seeds you sow, the heart you reap, can only flower from your sleep. And in your passing a weight is lifted, nothing cured but only shifted. As you leave, unperturbed, eyes flutter, your daughter stirs. As blanket sheets find your rest, the life you sired is truly blessed. A never-ending folding ocean, depth unknown, a child's devotion. Of endless new and tireless old, we must let go these things we hold. It's obvious enough that the daughter of the player, the father, is sick with some terminal illness. From the description of it, or from perhaps the details orienting around it, lung cancer. But the specifics don't matter. No, what matters is the implications of the situation itself, under the idea that through everything that occurs in the game, there's a simple narrative to follow. A father's daughter is sick and he decides to make a trade to let go of his own earthly life and instead give it to his daughter. And there is a beauty to that concept of sacrifice, which some might argue is a truest form of love. At the end of the game, when you finally get all 6 tablets that you're searching for throughout the entirety of the map, you're able to unlock the door, leading you into a far more pristine and golden version of the temple you just stepped into in the beginning. Your journey has finally ended from life to Bardo to the afterlife, as you come face to face with a foreign deity of sorts. From what I've found throughout looking through paintings of Tibetan depictions of these beings, it most prominently resembles Yamantaka, a protector of Buddhism and a violent aspect of Bodhisattva Manjushri, who assumes his form to vanquish Yama, the god of death, by defeating Yama, the cycle of rebirths, samsara, that prevents enlightenment is broken. He's also called the destroyer of the god of death, which is pretty awesome as well. And in some way, not the Bardo location we find ourselves in, but rather our own worries. The father in this narrative, his own worries, a burden of wondering whether his daughter is going to live, if the trade was worth it. It is precisely the burden that Yamantaka wishes to relieve him of. And so the trade was made, and his daughter is once again brought back from the clutches of death. Although even so, the way Kitchen describes it in the article, it would seem that it isn't a clutch at all, no. He describes wanting to create a positive relationship between humanity and the concept of death itself. In the article he says, "With Mandagon, I'd like to remove some of the morbid stigma that surrounds death. The idea of sacrifice in the game is told through an interaction between parent and child. The sacrifice of being a father or mother to someone is a very admirable thing, and I wish to one day be capable of making. The act of collecting the tablets and opening the final door in his spiritual task in the Bardo, a process of reviewing his sacrifice and accepting his death, it's a path towards liberation or a favorable rebirth." The narrative aligns well with Carl Jung's concept of the death and rebirth archetype and the process of individualization. The death-rebirth archetype is a universal pattern in myths and dreams, where the death of an old self or way of life is necessary for the rebirth of a newer or higher form of a complete self. The father's physical death is a literal death, but the game is about his psychological transition. He must die to his identity as a struggling, warring father and move on to a new spiritual state. We must let go of the things we hold. Even more in broadened terms, however, there is this format of liminality, a transitional state, where in anthropology and psychology there is a threshold or an in-between period where one is stripped of their former social identity and prepares for a new one. The Bardo is the ultimate liminal state. The father's death is a shattering of his old identity, and there is something human about the design of the map. Temples, shacks of wood and thatch, the fireplaces and waterfalls of the map. It's this representation of a transition into something better. And this world of Mandagon reflects the groundlessness and uncertainty of its own liminal space. Games like Little Misfortune, Little Nightmares, and even our own previously discussed titles like Fear and Hunger all touch on this more primal nature. Because the world, well, is a scary place. And despite the volume of our statements, that humanity is that it's this massively powerful collection, which is true in some sentiments, we are still a part of mortality itself. Tom Kitchen's idea behind this game was under this real-life influence of what death means to a person, and he wasn't even religious himself, and yet, even still, he created a game under the basis of something personal and universal. It's not a long game, and the only NPCs, if you would call it such, is the deity at the end itself, but even still, it showcases some beauty to death and life, and even through these uncertain times ahead of all of us. That is something to celebrate. There are festivals and cultural histories of the celebration of this transition. Dia de los Muertos, or Chuseok in Korea, a major harvest festival where families visit ancestral graves and perform memorial rites. At the end of the day, transcendence, whether through the small steps in our life or within a larger format of our systematic approach to living, leads us all to the same place, to the source of goodness. Altruism, heroism, or just being a good person, it's all entirely part of the same system of beings. And sometimes we'll react that way. Sometimes we'll become like a totem and walk alongside our entire ancestors and those that come before us, those that we've left behind, and move on to a better point in our lives. But either way, Mandagon teaches us to never give up on hope. and that our good actions will have their own impacts and consequences in the future. And sometimes, it's better to let things go.